The calculated loss. The darkness of deep space pressed against the viewports of the research vessel Empirical Truth. Inside, Commander Nivex moved carefully through the dim emergency lighting, trailing 3 slender fingers along the wall for balance. The ship's usual soft hum had been replaced by occasional creaks and the hiss of failing systems. Log entry 42, day 17 after the incident. Nivex spoke, her multifaceted eyes reflecting the weak glow of the console. Main propulsion remains offline. Backup systems operating at 28% capacity. Life support stable but limited to the command center and my personal quarters. She paused, looking out at the unfamiliar star patterns. The bright purple-tinged sun of her homeworld wasn't even visible from this remote region. Still no response to my distress signals, she continued. I've boosted power to the communication array by shutting down non-essential systems. If anyone is listening, they should be able to hear me now. But Nivex knew the truth. The consensus had almost certainly received her signals days ago. Their silence wasn't due to technical difficulties. It was a decision. A soft chime interrupted her thoughts. The ship's computer had completed its latest analysis. Nivex moved to the holographic display and watched as the numbers confirmed what she already suspected. Even with strict rationing, her supplies would last only another 82 days. Computer, display damage assessment, she ordered. A 3-dimensional model of the Empirical Truth appeared, more than half of it flashing red. The propulsion system was completely destroyed, torn apart when they had passed too close to what they thought was a dormant quantum fissure. The unexpected energy surge had fried critical ship systems and killed everyone else instantly. Nivex had survived only because she'd been in the heavily shielded containment lab at the time. Computer, calculate the nearest consensus outpost capable of mounting a rescue operation, Nivex requested, though she already knew the answer. The nearest outpost with rescue capabilities is Station 37, approximately 3.8 light-years from current position. The flat voice responded. Too far. Much too far. With steady hands but racing heart, Nivex opened the secured communication channel to Consensus Command. This would be her 8th message since the accident. The previous 7 had gone unanswered. This is Scientific Commander Nivex of Research Vessel Empirical Truth, day 17 after critical system failure. Requesting immediate extraction. I have valuable quantum stability research data that must be preserved. Please respond. She ended the transmission and waited. Minutes passed in silence. Then, unexpectedly, the communication panel illuminated. Nivex rushed to the console, hope surging through her crested head. Computer, play incoming message. The screen flickered, and the stern face of High Administrator Quarrel appeared. Nivex recognized him as one of the senior members of the Consensus Inner Circle. This was unusual. Typically, rescue operations were handled by lower-ranking officials. Commander Nivex, Quarrel began, his voice formal and cold. Your situation has been assessed by the Inner Circle, based on your ship's condition, location, and the resources required for extraction. We have determined that a rescue operation falls below our efficiency threshold. Nivex felt her body grow cold, her scales tightening against her skin. Your research data, while valuable, does not justify the expenditure of resources necessary to retrieve it, or you, at this time. The Empirical Truth and all personnel aboard are hereby classified as a calculated loss. The words hit Nivex like physical blows. A calculated loss, the consensus term for when saving something or someone cost more than its designated value. Your genetic lineage has been notified of your status and will receive the standard compensation package. Your service to the consensus has been recorded in the archives. Quarrel's expression didn't change as he delivered what amounted to a death sentence. This will be our final communication. May your remaining time advance knowledge. End transmission. The screen went black. Nivex stood frozen before the console. She had always known that the consensus operated on strict efficiency principles. It was how they had built their advanced civilization, by never wasting resources on inefficient endeavors. But she had never thought that calculation would be applied to her own life. "Computer," she said finally, her voice barely audible, "delete draft rescue request messages." Messages deleted. The computer confirmed. "Would you like to create a new message template?" "No, there's no point now." Nivex moved slowly to the viewport, staring out at the stars that now seemed cold and hostile. The consensus had abandoned her. They had decided her life wasn't worth saving. Decades of loyal service, her brilliant research career, all of it meant nothing when measured against the fuel and resources needed for a deep space rescue. In the days that followed, Nivex moved through the ship like a ghost. She carefully rationed her food and water. She shut down more systems to conserve power. And each day, she recorded her observations and thoughts, maintaining the scientific discipline that had defined her life. Log entry 51, day 26. She spoke into the recorder. "I've begun experimenting with the cellular reformation chamber. If I can reconfigure it to process the organic compounds in the medical bay, I might extend my supplies by several weeks." She didn't mention the crushing loneliness or the anger that sometimes overwhelmed her. Such emotional displays were considered primitive in consensus culture. Efficiency and logic were what mattered. And logically, the inner circle had made the correct decision. She just never thought she'd be on the wrong side of that logic. On day 31, as Nivex was checking the oxygen recyclers, the ship suddenly trembled. "Computer, status report," she called out, grabbing onto a support beam to steady herself. "Unknown energy surge detected. Origin: the quantum fissure remnant. Recommend immediate defensive measures." Nivex rushed to the command center. On the screen, she could see the distant fissure flaring with eerie blue light. Another energy surge was coming, one that might finish what the first had started. With practiced movements, Nivex diverted power to the shields. The ship's remaining energy reserves wouldn't be enough to protect the whole vessel, but she might save the command center and her quarters. As the wave of energy washed over the ship, systems failed one by one. Lights flickered and died. The temperature began to drop as the environmental controls went offline. When it was over, Nivex sat in near darkness, the emergency backup power providing only the most basic functions. "Computer, damage assessment," she said quietly. "Communication array severely damaged. Life support operating at minimum capacity. Estimated remaining operational time, 47 days. Nivex nodded slowly. The consensus had abandoned her, and now even her slim chance of survival was fading. She was truly alone in the vastness of space with nothing but a dying ship and the cold stars for company. As she stared out into the darkness, something caught her eye, a faint pulsing light that hadn't been there before, probably just debris from her ship reflecting the distant starlight. Nivex turned away. She had work to do if she wanted to survive even 47 more days. And despite everything, despite the consensus's abandonment and the hopelessness of her situation, she found that she still wanted to live. She just didn't know why anymore. 41 days had passed since the consensus abandoned Nivex. Her once pristine uniform hung loose on her frame. The strict rationing had kept her alive, but barely. Each day, the cold of space crept further into the ship as systems failed one by one. Log entry 78, Nivex said, her voice rougher than before. Day 41. "I've managed to reconfigure the material synthesizer to process the nutrient gel from medical supplies. It's barely palatable, but it should extend my food reserves by approximately 15 days. She didn't mention that the synthesizer was already showing signs of failure, or that the water recycler made alarming noises whenever it ran. Some facts were too depressing to record. Nivex finished her daily check of the life support systems and returned to the command center. This had become her routine: maintain the ship, check for signals, record her logs, and then sit at the viewport watching the stars. The mysterious light she had seen weeks ago had not appeared again. Probably just space debris after all. She was about to turn away when something on the sensor panel caught her eye. A faint beeping, almost too quiet to hear. "Computer, identify incoming signal," Nivex said, rushing to the console. Signal detected. Origin unknown. Not matching any consensus patterns. Nivex's heart raced faster. Display signal data. The screen filled with a strange pattern. Pulses and pauses unlike anything in the consensus database. Not random noise, but definitely not consensus communication either. "Is it a natural phenomenon?" Nivex asked. "Negative. Signal contains regular patterns consistent with artificial origin. Artificial, made by intelligent beings. Someone was out there." "Can you determine the source location?" The computer took longer than usual to respond. "Approximate source location identified. Signal originates from sector 219G, approximately 0.6 light-years from current position. Less than 1 light-year away." That was closer than any consensus outpost. But who could it be? The consensus had thoroughly explored this region and found no intelligent species nearby. "Computer, divert power from non-essential systems to boost our transmission capabilities. I want to respond to this signal. Warning. Diverting power will reduce life support efficiency by 24%. Do it anyway," Nivex ordered. For the first time in weeks, she felt something other than despair. As the computer rerouted power, Nivex quickly composed a response message. She included basic mathematical sequences that any intelligent species should recognize, along with the ship's identification and location data. "Transmitting now," the computer announced. Nivex waited, hardly daring to breathe. Minutes passed, then hours. By the time she gave up and went to her sleeping quarters, her earlier excitement had faded. Perhaps the signal had been a glitch, or some strange echo from a distant star. She was halfway through her small daily meal when the alarm sounded. "Incoming transmission," the computer announced. Nivex dropped her food and ran back to the command center. Display message. The screen filled with unfamiliar symbols, definitely not consensus language. But beneath them was a series of mathematical responses to the patterns Nivex had sent. Whoever they were, they had understood her basic communication attempt. "Computer, analyze this language. Any matches in our database?" No exact matches found. However, pattern analysis suggests similarities to languages from Sector 88. Sector 88 was far from here, at the very edge of consensus-explored space. The inner circle had deemed it resource-poor and not worth thorough investigation. The message continued streaming in. Among the alien text were simple diagrams, what appeared to be a ship, coordinates, and a time measurement. Were they telling her they were coming? "Computer, respond with our thanks and confirmation," Nivex instructed. "Use the same mathematical basis we established." Over the next few hours, the primitive but effective communication continued. Nivex learned that the vessel called itself the Aurora and belonged to a species called humans. They had detected her ship's energy signature during an exploratory mission and investigated out of curiosity. Most importantly, they were indeed coming to her location. Estimated arrival time is 14 days, the computer translated from their latest message. 14 days. Nivex could hardly believe it. After being abandoned by her own kind, strangers from an unknown species were coming to help her. It defied logic. A new message appeared on screen. The translation was rough, but clear enough. "Are you injured? Do you require medical assistance?" The question confused Nivex. Of course, she was in danger. Her ship was failing. But why would they ask about medical needs specifically? The consensus would have prioritized the ship and its valuable data, not the individual inside it. "Tell them life support is failing, but I am physically stable," Nivex dictated. Then she hesitated before continuing. "Ask them why they are helping me." The response came faster than expected. "Because you're alive and need help. That's enough reason." Those simple words struck Nivex deeply. No cost analysis, no efficiency calculations, just a simple statement of need and response. As the stars slowly shifted outside her viewport, Nivex wondered what kind of species these humans were and whether she would live long enough to find out. The value of one life. As the days passed, communication with the human ship improved. Their computer systems were surprisingly adaptable, quickly learning to translate basic concepts. Nivex learned they were on an exploratory mission when they detected her signal. "You diverted from your assigned mission," Nivex asked during one exchange. "This became our mission the moment we picked up your distress call," came the reply. This concept was foreign to Nivex. In the consensus, missions were planned with precise efficiency. Deviation was permitted only for the most compelling reasons, usually involving extremely valuable resources or strategic advantage, never for a single stranded individual. On day 10 of their communication, the human ship sent a new message. "We're pushing our engines to maximum. New ETA 36 hours. Hold on." Nivex felt something she hadn't experienced in a long time. Hope, but also fear. What if these humans were not what they seemed? The consensus taught that other species were either threats or resources. These humans didn't fit either category so far. That night, as Nivex tried to rest, the ship's power fluctuated wildly. She rushed to the command center to find multiple systems failing simultaneously. Computer, status report. Power core destabilizing. Estimated time to complete failure, 42 hours. 42 hours. The humans wouldn't arrive for another 36. It would be close. Computer, divert all power to life support and communication, she ordered. Shut down everything else. The lights dimmed further as the computer complied. Nivex sent an urgent message to the approaching ship explaining her situation. Their response was immediate. Increasing speed. New ETA 34 hours. "We're coming for you, Nivex. Stay alive." Nivex stared at those words on the screen. In her entire career with the consensus, no one had ever told her to stay alive, as if her individual existence mattered above all else. As the ship grew colder and the air thinner, Nivex moved to the viewport. Somewhere out there, strangers were pushing their engines beyond safe limits, risking their own lives to save hers. It made no logical sense by consensus standards. Yet as she watched the stars, Nivex saw a small point of light growing steadily brighter, moving too fast to be anything natural. Someone was coming for her, not for her ship, not for her data, but for her. And for the first time in her life, Nivex understood that there might be something more valuable than efficiency. The growing dot of light in the viewport had become a ship. Nivex watched with a mixture of hope and disbelief as the human vessel approached her own dying craft. It was smaller than her research ship and strangely shaped, bulky in some areas and sleek in others, lacking the symmetrical precision of consensus design. "Computer, status update," Nivex rasped, her voice weak in the thinning air. "Life support at critical levels. Oxygen at 19%. Power core shutdown in 8 hours 22 minutes. She had survived longer than expected by moving to the smallest compartment on the ship and sealing it off, but soon even that wouldn't be enough. A new message appeared on her screen. Visual contact established. "We see your ship. Preparing docking procedure. Stand by." Docking. Nivex frowned. The logical approach would be for them to retrieve her research data remotely or perhaps use a small probe to recover essential items. Directly connecting their ship to her failing vessel was unnecessarily risky. "Warning," she sent back. "My ship's power core is unstable. Docking not recommended." The response came quickly. "Understood and noted. Docking anyway. We're not leaving you behind." Nivex couldn't comprehend their reasoning. By now, they must have scanned her ship and seen its condition. The risks were clearly visible, yet they were coming anyway. Through the viewport, she watched as the human ship maneuvered closer. It was graceful despite its odd design, precisely aligning itself with her vessel's emergency airlock. Preparing for docking, came another message. Please move to your airlock if possible. If not, we'll come to you. Nivex gathered her strength and made her way through the frigid corridors. Each breath was a struggle now, the air so thin that her vision blurred at the edges. By the time she reached the airlock, she could barely stand. Through the small window, she saw the human ship extend a flexible docking tube. There was a metallic clang as it connected, followed by the hiss of atmosphere being equalized. The outer door of her airlock remained sealed, the locking mechanism no longer functional without main power. "I cannot open the airlock," she messaged. "Automatic systems offline." "Stand back," came the reply. "We're coming through." Nivex moved away from the door just as a series of sharp sounds echoed through the metal. They were cutting their way in. Such an action would damage both vessels, an inefficient and potentially dangerous solution that no consensus rescue would ever attempt. With a screech of protest, the airlock door slid partly open. Two figures in sealed environmental suits pushed through the gap, their helmets obscuring their features. One immediately moved to Nivex, while the other began attaching equipment to her ship's walls. The first figure approached her cautiously, hands raised in what Nivex recognized as a universal gesture of peace. The being was taller than Nivex, with a bulkier frame. Through the faceplate, Nivex could see a face unlike any she had encountered. No scales, no crests, just smooth skin and forward-facing eyes. "Commander Nivex." The voice came through her ship's communication system, the translation still functioning. "I'm Captain Alina Reyes of the Earth exploratory vessel Aurora. We're here to get you out." Nivex tried to respond but found she couldn't speak. The lack of oxygen was affecting her more severely than she'd realized. The humans seemed to understand immediately. "She's hypoxic," Captain Reyes said to her companion. "Set up the emergency atmospheric converter and get her stabilized. I'll secure the data core." The second human quickly deployed a device that began filling the area with breathable air. As oxygen levels rose, Nivex felt her mind clearing. "My research," she managed to say. "It must be preserved." "We'll get it," Captain Reyes assured her. "But you're our priority." "Why?" Nivex asked, the question that had been burning within her for days. "Why risk yourselves for a stranger?" The captain paused in her work. "Because that's what we do. No one gets left behind, if we can help it." "But the efficiency." "Some things matter more than efficiency," the captain interrupted. "Now let's get you to safety before this ship gives up completely." The second human, who introduced himself as Dr. Chen, helped Nivex into an environmental suit designed for emergencies. It was clearly not meant for her physiology, but it would keep her alive during the transfer. "Your power core is destabilizing faster than expected," Dr. Chen explained as he worked. "We need to move quickly." As if to emphasize his point, the ship shuddered violently. Alarms that Nivex thought had long since failed suddenly blared to life. "Captain," Dr. Chen called out urgently, "core temperature spiking. We have minutes, not hours." "Grab what you can and let's go," Captain Reyes ordered, securing a small container that Nivex recognized as her research data storage unit. Priority is getting her out alive. They half-carried Nivex through the airlock and into the docking tube. Behind them, the empirical truth groaned as internal structures began to fail. They were halfway through the tube when the ship lurched again, more violently this time. The docking mechanism tore free, and the tube began to depressurize. "Move," Captain Reyes shouted, pushing both Nivex and Dr. Chen ahead of her toward the Aurora's airlock. The three of them tumbled into the human ship just as emergency bulkheads slammed shut behind them. Through a viewport, Nivex watched as her home for the past 41 days drifted away, internal lights flickering before going dark permanently. "That was too close," Dr. Chen muttered, checking Nivex for injuries. "But we made it. You're safe now, Commander." Safe. The word felt strange to Nivex. She had been prepared to die alone in the void, abandoned by her own kind. Instead, these aliens, These humans had risked their lives to save her. In the following days, as Navex recovered in the Aurora's medical bay, she learned more about her rescuers. The humans were a relatively young spacefaring species, only recently venturing beyond their own solar system. They were explorers and traders, driven by curiosity as much as necessity. "Your consensus sounds efficient," Captain Rice commented when Nivex explained why she had been abandoned. The captain didn't try to hide the disapproval in her voice. "It is our way," Nivex replied. "Resources are allocated where they will provide the greatest benefit to the most individuals. And a single life doesn't factor into that equation." "Not when weighed against the cost of deep space rescue," Nivex admitted. "It is logical." Captain Rice shook her head. "There's a difference between logic and wisdom, Commander. Sometimes the most important things can't be calculated." As the Aurora continued its journey, now heading toward a human outpost where Nivex could arrange transport or possibly asylum, she found herself increasingly fascinated by human society. They were inefficient in countless ways. Their ship design prioritized comfort over space conservation. Their duty schedules included what they called free time, and they engaged in activities with no apparent purpose beyond enjoyment. Yet despite, or perhaps because of, these inefficiencies, they had accomplished remarkable things. Their adaptability and creativity had solved problems that the consensus approach would have deemed impossible. Most striking to Nivex was how they valued each individual. When a crew member was injured during routine maintenance, the entire ship's schedule was adjusted without hesitation. No one questioned the decision or calculated whether the injured engineer's contribution justified the delay. One evening, as Nivex sat in what the humans called the mess hall, watching the crew interact, Captain Rice joined her. "Credit for your thoughts?" the captain asked, using a human expression Nivex had learned meant she was curious about what Nivex was thinking. "I was calculating the resources your ship expended to rescue me," Nivex admitted. "The fuel, the risk, the deviation from your mission parameters. By any objective measure, it was inefficient." Captain Rice smiled. "Maybe efficiency isn't everything." The consensus would disagree. "And what do you think?" the captain asked. After all this, Nivex looked around at the crew, beings who had risked their lives for a stranger simply because she needed help. She thought of the consensus message declaring her a calculated loss, and the human message telling her to stay alive. "I think," she said slowly, "that perhaps there are different ways to measure value, and that sometimes the value of a single life cannot be calculated." Captain Rice nodded. "Welcome to humanity's way of thinking, Commander." As the Aurora continued through the void, Nivex looked out at the stars. The same stars that had seemed so cold and hostile when she was alone. Now, traveling among these strange, inefficient, remarkable humans, the universe seemed different. She was no longer just a calculated loss. She was Nivex, and her life had value, not because of what she could contribute or what she knew, but simply because she was alive. And that, she was beginning to understand, was reason enough.